The win-lose mindset is a loser's mindset. I'm Dale Walls. I was the founder of Corsica Technologies. Last 5 years, I've found myself doing management consulting, working with leaders, what I call execution excellence. Understanding that you're going to make mistakes getting there, but the part about being excellent is it's not perfection. You're going to screw up, but you're going to learn from it. I problems. What's an I problem? It's I this, I that. I say turn that into, with all due respect to them, they chase the latest and greatest. When you've really got this situation where you're not defining what your MSP is, like it or not, you're in the leadership role. How many people do we see get up on stage and like perform? That's you. You started a business. There's a lot of people looking at you going, man, I could never do that. But it's for the same reasons, because people quit bad leadership. It's hard to win clients. It's hard to get good people on your team. So do you really want to be going in there, being unreasonable, egotistical, seek first to understand, then to be understood? And as you go to that technician that's been struggling with something for 3 hours, the bad leader would be go storm in there and start chewing their butt. So you can go in and go, hey, tell me what's going on. Have you asked anyone for help? No, I haven't. You think you should have?
Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of MSP Insider, the show bringing conversations to MSPs by MSPs or former MSPs to say the things that, honestly, I wish I knew and hopefully extract out of the guests and the experts that come on to really share their knowledge. So without further ado, welcome today, Dale. Dale, why don't you please tell us who you are, why you do what you do?
Yeah, I'm Dale Walls. As far as the topic here, MSP, I was the founder of the Corsica Technologies, built that business and sold it in 2018, exited in 2020 after a few decades in the space. My background was enterprise IT management as a member of the U.S. Marine Corps at a time when, you're expected to know everything. Like I learned how to run fiber and build websites and everything in between, right? So I was really kind of set up to kind of what our industry became. You had to be everything for everyone under the guise of IT, and I really enjoyed that. So since exiting, I've started a number of other businesses. In fact, as we were talking about pre-show, I just recently acquired another MSP and got back in the space. In the last 5 years, I've found myself doing management consulting, working with leaders. And it's kind of like my passion is leadership management and really getting things done. But I really empathize with leader. I think the world's starving for good leaders, and I certainly, thankfully, or I'll take as a compliment, people have asked me like, hey, how'd you do it? Right. Because Corsica was a lent in my pocket to a decent exit as one of the industry leading MSPs at the time. And so I do empathize with, a business owner's journey to find ultimately what I find as personal sovereignty. Like they think it's finance, they think it's personal freedom. But what I've kind of come to understand is like they really want it all. Like they want to really be able to call their own shots, and that is financial. But they want their time back. They want to like be in charge of their own destiny, and that's not just obviously MSP owners, but people that start businesses. Period. Like that's really what they're out to do. So.
Yeah, I love that. We're gonna circle back to those words and unpack those alone, because you don't really hear oftentimes it described that way, sovereignty, right? One of the words that I kind of stumbled into to use for similar reasons, although it may or may not be the right word choice, is emancipation, right? Like to be able to truly self-eject and find that opportunity. But sovereignty is a good word for it too. So appreciate that. And we've got a lot to talk about because you have so much context that we can dive into and really unpack and go different directions, from MSP to post-exit to making the decision to go back in, which I'm sure people would love to even just dive in there. So before I get overly excited about the questions I have for you, one of the things that we do on the show is open the dialogue by taking a question that the previous guest left behind. And so I'll ask you this question. I'll read it too, so I don't butcher it, but I'm going to ask you that question and I'll let you answer. And then from there, we'll dive off into kind of our own conversation. But I think this one might actually be a little congruent with some of your experience. So this question actually comes from Gene Rich. He's the CEO of Traceless. He also runs an MSP as well. So kind of a unique share there. But the question was, what generally has been your experience in an area of improvement that has created the most incremental increase in margin to the business as an MSP owner?
Oh, so a lot to it. I think we're saying, what is one thing that we've done to kind of increase the value of the business? Are we talking financially as far as you're
Yeah,
concerned, or?
through gross margin probably would be the specific.
Yeah, I think I think one of the things that I would say to that, and good question, and I like your double line format.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that organizations do, the ones that do really well, I think, is MSPs, is go beyond the sale,
Mhm.
go beyond the support, and go to retention, right? And this is where, kind of spinning even to be a good leader, like one of the key tenets of being a great leader is being a good communicator. And I think
Yeah.
like one of the things that I know that's important with regard to a thriving MSP operation is you got to focus on retention, right? You've got to make sure, and the way I've kind of coached either my team or other business owners is that if you're not talking to your clients, the sales folks of other organizations
Yeah.
are, right. And
Right.
I feel like that's a thing that gets lost, is that they get hyper focused on top line stuff, they get hyper focused on doing the work,
Mhm.
and when it comes down to communication, they're really not given the right amount of attention to the fact that their existing clients want a level of leadership communications as well, right? Like
Mhm.
I always looked at, like, when I was being hired as an MSP, we were emulating the as if they hired the IT guy that worked in I usually joke and say the corner office in the basement, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you were hired by them, and
Mhm.
so you needed to report to that business accordingly. Where does IT stand? How are you
Mhm.
keeping it up with the demands of the business, and so on, and so that keeps having that level of consciousness, like, helps keep your retention metric high, right? Like, you don't
Mhm.
want to be a business where you're fighting, especially today, right? Everyone knows they need an MSP, right? There was a point
Yeah.
in time, I'll say in 2000s, that I was winning new business fist to cuff because MSP was new, and
Mhm.
it was a style that I was used to delivering from the focus of being an enterprise management background, like total cost of ownership and having a standard, and even the idea of fixed fee and having a help desk and knock and all these things that were kind of, as far as our industry back then, like, because you're breaking away from time material and all that stuff. But I always
Mhm.
felt like they were hiring my team to deliver IT services.
Yeah.
And you really need to make sure that you're not fighting so hard to win business just to see it fall out the back door because you're not given the right TLC, active, proactive communication with your clients. And I know this is an area that MSPs, I feel like, struggle with. Like, I don't know how many MSPs I've talked to, like, just can't get QBRs down, right? Like,
Yeah.
can't find time to do the quarterly meetings or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
and it's like it's essential. You have to, so as far as like moving the needle, like, if you want to move the needle and improve your margins, let's say gross margin, net profits, you
Mhm.
can't lose a percentage of business every month as you fight to
Yeah.
bring in new business. I don't know if that answers a question the way you think it'd be beneficial, but that's kind of like a first reaction to that.
Yeah. No, I like that that was where you chose to focus. I think it, in many ways, it does parallel probably the theme of this particular episode as it relates to leadership, because a lot of the focus gets placed on kind of the sexy part of the business, which is the net new growth, right? But the reality for most of the MSPs in the market, 80% or more, is that they're still growing by referral based growth,
Yeah.
right? Which also tags the retention as being so important. And I think once MSPs tend to shift their focus to, okay, I need to go get net new logos, not ones that are coming to me because they get referred by my my happy clients, but I want to go grow the business because I want to get higher than normal positive attrition basically year over year. And when you take your eye off that ball, like the retention, the service, that what you're doing and how you're doing it, and start focusing on trying to figure out how to sell in a totally different way to a totally different market, in a way in which you have to educate them and inform them and convince them that it's worth, gambling on you, they they've unintentionally taken their attention off the rest of the business, right? And then probably underneath that, there's got to be a great leadership question in here, but it's the thing that's coming to my mind in that description is like, you get what you tolerate. And that was a hard lesson I learned probably the 4 years into my MSP journey, maybe 5, when I went from being a solo producer in a technical role to being responsible for 24 people. And I had, outside of being a Boy Scout growing up and, all the leadership skills that gave me, which I'm not discounting, I had no formal training at all in leadership, in communication, in people, right? In casting the vision and or holding people accountable. So through that massive buildup or lead up to the question, is like, is it as easy as distilling down even like 3 pieces to a framework for that typical MSP who was someone who started a company because they were interested in it. They woke up about 2, 3, 4 years later and realized, crap, I got 3 or 4 employees, a decent book of business. I like kind of have a company here. And they like have to flip that light switch to say, I'm a leader now, right? Or I need to be, or I need to go source one or find one. How do they get off the X? Is a better way of asking that question in the shortest way possible.
It's number one, and it's something like philosophically I try to instill in business owners is like, you got to know, like you're always leading, right? So leadership is also, we know we're leading someone, like you have a direct report. So you mentioned you went from leading yourself to leading a team of 20, right? Well, you are leading yourself to accomplish your job day to day. And now that goes to leading 20 direct reports. But there's also another facet of leadership that I don't think gets talked enough about, which is even though, they might not be direct reports, you're always setting some sort of example for those around you, right? So even when you were a single producer and you had your peers or you had other peers in an organization that maybe weren't in your direct team or whatever, but they're seeing you, they might not report to you and you might not be directing them, but you are influencing them on how you show up, right? So leadership, whether you have a team or you're just leading yourself, it also goes so far to like, how are you showing up in front of others? And that's kind of goes to, and I'm a very cliche guy because I think they work, but like that's the whole rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like we've all been around like rock stars on the team, but because they are there, the rest of the team is doing good, right? So, and I think like you said, one of those things that kind of triggered me, like, well, if I'm an owner and I'm just going to hire someone to lead the team for me. How are they going to, like, you still have a responsibility to the leadership of the organization. You may have hired in the execution, the day to day, but you still have to cast a vision, right? You still, right. I mean, I think one of the fundamentals of leadership is making sure there's a clear vision that we're working towards, that the team goes, yeah, I'm here because I align with that vision and I understand how I'm contributing to reaching that vision, right? Like, I get it. Like, I know you had my friend David Powell on, right? And he always talked about like MSPs being tech led or sales led, and I know my tech led organizations, often start to cap because I don't think they really take ownership of like being that business owner. They get content, and sales led, I think, is the opposite. They blow themselves up and then they can't keep up with the technical demands. And so I think you have to recognize always that you are in the driver's seat, and your business is only going to grow as far as you grow, and understanding that like you are the leader. I would even say like one of the secrets, or I'll say not secret, but one of the things I know that benefited our success originally was, you got your vendors pushing their agendas on you all the time, but there's only real one agenda. It's the needs of your customers, right? And that's a leadership call that, I remember the days when Microsoft was pushing, like, remember small business accounting? It was like a crap product and they were pushing it to compete with QuickBooks or whatever. And they're like, this is it. You got to go to market with this. And, as a manager of hundreds of business customers, you got to go, well, hey, hold on. I know I'm a goal partner and I know you want me adhering to your marketing today, but my customers don't care about that. That's not their current problem. And that's you got to lead your vendors. You got to lead your clients. You've got to lead your team, of course, but you also have to lead your prospects, right? Like they don't know what they're signing on for. They don't know, like you have to lead them to a better outcome for them. You talked about like winning new business being hard. Yeah, because the pain of changing to a new MSP is very high. I mean, I see countless customers IT, customers, small, medium businesses, organizations, whatever, just
Mm-hmm.
dying on the hill of a poor provider
Yeah.
because they're afraid of the pain to go to another provider.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that's painful. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it's pain. So you have to lead your prospects to feel that they can trust you to get them through that pain, right? That's their biggest
Mm-hmm.
reluctance to move forward. So
Yeah. I love you called that out too, because that was one of the things that we saw, and one of the things that I led to and coached to in the sales teams that I ran ultimately, right? Like the biggest competitor we're selling against is inaction or indecision, whichever way you splice it, because of the exact situation you described. The perceived pain outweighs the actual pain of making the transition and the change. And so you have to be able to articulate and create, like you literally are manifesting the event, as I called it, in the sales process, such that the event that you've created is far more uncomfortable than settling for good enough
right,
anymore, which seems like the thing that most customers are okay buying and or sticking around with, is like this good enough line that the industry has just sort of like established this equilibrium on. When I interviewed Matt Lee, we talked about this, where it was probably the second MSP I was at. We used to talk oftentimes in my market where the success criteria for being an MSP was to suck a little bit less than the next guy and to stay in business a little bit longer. And
yeah,
like you just sort of like happened into the growth, because one would go away or they would drop the ball and actually have an event, and then boom, the phone would ring, right? And
yeah,
it was so less than,
yeah,
because I don't know that, like, one, the industry doesn't have standards, so it's not like you're measured by any sort of like ranking system by any means. And I think it seemed like most of the businesses sort of like back ended into whatever they were and however large they grew. And so I want to kind of come back into the leadership component, because one of the things that I had seen um, when reading some of your material online was this concept of like soft leadership really killing and or penalizing MSPs, right? And I've seen some decent amount of engagement around that. I'd want you to break that down for me so that we can really better understand like what actions we can control to take ownership over that and make an impact in our business as MSP owners to not fall into that gap.
yeah. And I think, like, one of the big things I teach, we talked about like different businesses, and post Corsica, I started Lions Guide just to serve this fact, right? Like, to
Mm-hmm.
one, kept repeating myself on lessons learned, if people were asking. So I was like, man, I gotta start recording this stuff. And
Yeah.
and so we created a library of leadership lessons. And really, people get thrown into leadership roles, and they're
Mm-hmm.
just, there's no book for it. I mean, there's books for it, don't get me wrong, but there's no
Sure.
people just get thrown in leadership roles, and it's a little bit shock and awe. And you're going to fumble for the next 6 months to 2 years, or you're just going to fail out of it and go, man, I just rather just do my own thing.
Yeah.
So leadership is hard. And so you mentioned something here I made a note of, is that, the IT industry is not like being an electrician or a plumber where there's a set standard, and it's
Mm-hmm.
who can economically deliver that standard, the
Yeah.
pass inspection, the least expensive, right? So you win the
Mm-hmm.
contract. So our industry, really, where the power of leadership comes in is it really calls for you to define your standard. Like, how does your practice deliver, right? there's
Mm.
there's not the code, right, to
Yeah.
adhere to, like these other spaces. So in essence, to really have success, you've got to lead. And I'm going to tell you right now, like, for those listening to it, and they may not know it, or maybe they do, but if you let the vendors, or your, with all due respect to them, your technical staff, like, that chase technology, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they chase the latest and greatest, or chasing technology constantly, or your vendors are telling you what to do, and you've really got this situation where you're not defining what your MSP is, but you're letting the tail wag the dog, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What the technicians want, these, jumping from different vendors and technologies every day, like, it causes a lot of pain, and it takes you as the leader, to owner, and go, this is the MSP that I'm going to be. This is our standard of service delivery. this is our formula of operations. These are our standardized vendors, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's leadership. Like you have to take it's leadership. When I talk to business owners as well, like you got to look at your business as it's a work of art, man. Like,
Mm.
it's yours. Like, it's your canvas, paint it, like make it yours. And it is going to produce for you the answers are your own. When
Yeah.
people ask us, just tell me what you did. I'm like, hey man, look, what I did was at my time, my place.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what I did, but do not take that and go, this is what I got to do. I don't know. This is what you got to do. You got to
Mm-hmm.
find your own answers. And again, that comes back to like that in essence is what leadership is. You've got to kind of have the courage to go find your formula, find your way.
Mm. Yeah, I like that you ended on the hook of that word there with courage, right? Because I think it's so subtle. It's also so um, abstract, perhaps not really talked about either. And yet, the thing that I've learned on the heels of being an MSP for 18 years, the last 7 months being in a co-founder of a startup serving MSPs was really that. Like every day is met with that period, right? Like the entire human spectrum of emotions is possible, but you can also choose to control which ones you're going to lean into and feed. And one of the ones, and my co-founders and I were just talking about this last week, courage is one that if you just increase the size of it, right? The breadth and the impact and the size of that energy, and you embrace the courage part, then all the other ones can exist too, right? Fear, anxiety, stress, like the whole spectrum is there. But like if courage is there, then it dwarfs everything else. And if you default to action between those two things, like you're going to find success if you don't quit. Like those two or three things combined is a bit of a recipe. Um, One of the things you mentioned earlier, maybe you can help define it or unpack it a little bit more for me as well, was when I go back to that, when I was then responsible for a team. Um, you mentioned like the difference between direct reports and direct leadership. At the time, I was reading a bunch of different leadership books trying to figure this thing out, right? And one of the books, and I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head, but it talked about these styles of leadership or these types of leadership. And one of them that it described was indirect leadership. And as soon as I saw that and the definitions on the page, I'm like, that's me. That's the guy. Like, I'm an indirect leader. I show up a certain way. I like default to action. I just do the thing. I don't even want to call it leading by example because that's too cliche for me. But like, indirect leader is where I felt home. And yet, leadership, like defined direct leadership, was on the other side of the courage it took to have the really uncomfortable conversations, to go hold myself or someone else accountable, to go do all these other things that were like just on the other side of fear or just on the other side of tolerance.
Yeah.
But I haven't really revisited that idea for 15 years since I first had that role. So maybe if any of that makes sense, you can unpack kind of like where and how you see direct or indirect leadership as it relates to being more of that, like, 13 employee MSP, small business. It's like owner with maybe a middle manager, probably not. And you just kind of have this team of people. Like, how can we speak to them who didn't come out the womb wanting to be leaders, right? Direct leaders of running and owning a business of 50 people, like helping them realize how they can make little changes in their daily behavior to have such a huge ripple effect in the business that they own.
Yeah. In this area, it's really about, the kind of the buckets I start to fit this stuff in is kind of leadership, execution, optimization, right?
Mm-hmm.
You like it or not, you're in the leadership role. Like
Yeah.
when you decided that you're going to be a business owner, like you're in a leadership role, and that as a leader, a couple things, and we've been poisoned over the last coming up on 20 years now of social media is this perfectionist, like afraid to make a mistake, right? So now
Mm-hmm.
here we are. What holds us back is like we're afraid to try, like especially if you're a solopreneur, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you don't have a partner to bounce something off of, or you don't want to show that you're vulnerable in front of your team and that you've made a
Mm-hmm.
mistake because you're afraid that it's going to damage your trust. Like all these things, like we really get in our heads as leaders, and we lack confidence. Just because we've really been conditioned, for that highlight reel
Yeah.
presence, right? Like everything's perfect, everything, never wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just that's a fear you got to get over, right? Because this is where it comes back to courage. Like, how many people do we see? I'm not a musician or whatever, but you see people like get up on stage and like perform.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, man, like that's like I could never do that, right? How many you've
Yeah.
seen things that you go,
Right.
man, I could never do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's you. Like
Yeah.
you started a business, like that's you. And there's a lot of people looking at you going, man, I could never do that. But it's for the same reasons, because you've had the courage to step up on that stage.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got to go to work. And chances are, like, you're going to make mistakes, but like a musician will tell you, I missed a note, but they didn't even know. I knew I
Yeah.
missed that note, but, and so I think we like really, and it's natural fear, right? We get in our heads about it. That's
Mm-hmm.
why, I kind of hung my hat on a lot of like, seeking clarity. I really preach that a lot. It's like, cause the more you,
Mm.
shine a light on like what you don't know, right? We fear the
Yeah.
unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you can kind of just slow down and just take a minute to dig in to the unknown a little bit, it does shrink, right? Like it's every children book about fear. It talks about like,
Mm-hmm.
once you peek behind the dark curtain, it's not as
Yeah.
scary as you thought it was. And that's the same as things that are holding us back as leaders of a business or organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like this perfectionist mindset, what I tell people is like, look, being a perfectionist is a closed mindset. It's like all or nothing thinking, right? Uh, if you think everything's got to be perfect, the minute something goes wrong, you do something wrong, you feel like all is lost, right?
Yeah.
But if you kind of change that a little bit and think about like focusing on what I call execution excellence, like what are you trying to get done, and understanding that you're going to make mistakes getting there, you're going to execute, but the part about being excellent is, it's not perfection. You're going to screw up, but you're going to learn from it. It's all is
Mm-hmm.
not lost. And if we can just get over that, and be honest with your team, like there's nothing more that your team will respect than that day you go, look, I made the call on this, and I know you guys knew this before I did, but that was the wrong move. Like,
Mm.
and I've learned from that.
Yeah.
I've told people like I've had been at odds with, and people tell you like, oh, I'm sorry. Like I'm like, I don't want apologies, right? I want the understanding that you understood you did wrong, you've learned from it, and you're committing to
Mm-hmm.
not do that again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, like when you make a mistake, just do that with your team. Like air it out. Hey, I understand I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I've learned from it, and I'm not going to make that mistake again, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
build so much trust capital, with your team, and they get behind you because they're saying, yeah, you're up here on stage performing. This is, I mean,
Yeah.
and they're thankful for that. I mean, and again, the opposite of clarity, when you're not having that type of communication, and I know I'm talking
Mm.
about your team, but that goes the same with customers, right?
Yeah.
You screw up something with your customer, and you sit down with that
Mm.
that decision maker and go, hey, look, this didn't go the way we wanted. We were trying something that didn't work. We learned from it. We fixed it. Like just like your employee, you're building trust capital with that client, and that goes back to
Mm.
retention, right? Why do customers leave service providers? It's really got a lot to do with trust.
Yeah.
I don't trust that you're billing me the right amount. I don't trust that your guys are going to come through for me when I need them to, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
we're in the trust business when we're in the service business. So you're always leading, and to have that courage. I always tell people like clarity leads to confidence, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, I want to go be a craftsman, I want to build my kitchen table, right? Like until you understand like you go seek to learn, like what do I need to know,
Yeah.
what tools do I need, and that's clarity. And
Mm-hmm.
when you get that clarity, that education of doing this new thing or whatever it is, that gives you confidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you have that confidence, now you can take courageous action. So
Yeah.
that's why I tell people like when you really understand that generally our fears are rooted in the unknown, and when you're holding yourself back as a business owner, just ask yourself like, what am I afraid of, and go
Mm-hmm.
start shining a light on that, and it's going to start to blossom in that confidence that you need to go ahead and take action.
Yeah. That's such a powerful concept. And one of the words that I don't want to get lost in your explanation either, and maybe we can just hover on this word for a little bit because it took me, I'm 40 years old now. It took me 35 years to figure out the superpower that lied beneath this one word, and that was vulnerability. Um, and oftentimes, especially in our culture, vulnerability doesn't sit at the head of the table next to strength, right? It's actually seen differently, even though it's why I call it a superpower is I believe it to be true that the ability to be vulnerable is almost one of the highest forms of demonstrating strength, for lack of
Mhm.
a better way of saying it. Um, so maybe first, where or how did you stumble across like the light bulb moment for vulnerability, and what can you offer as guidance or advice to the you 20 years ago leading an MSP, growing and just in the slog of it every day?
Probably we're well. I guess when you're talking about this, the vulnerability, and then I'll eat my own dog food here for a minute. Like I was just saying, like, what are you afraid of?
Mm.
Like to be vulnerable. Like, what are you afraid of? Well, you're afraid of loss of reputation, right? You're afraid of looking inferior. And I guess another lesson I've learned, like a superiority complex is really an inferiority complex in disguise, right? You're
Yeah.
so worried about what people think about you that you have to put on this,
Mm-hmm.
presentation that you're superior in every way, make no mistakes.
Yeah.
So, you really need to, when I was in the Marine Corps as a young, what we call non-rate private PFC Lance Corporal. You weren't really a sergeant or corporal in charge of people yet, but you were serving. And, you get sent to work on the general's computer and you get all nervous about it. And, I had a staff sergeant tell me one time, he's like, hey, man, like they're sending me literally to go work on a, four-star general system. And I'm nervous about it because I'm like a young Lance Corporal. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, he puts his pants on one leg at a time, and you do, right?
Mm.
You're just going to serve him, like
Yeah.
just like he serves us as general. You're going to go serve them, and that's where it really comes down to like shedding this ego that
Mm-hmm.
again you've put on yourself, that you think they expect me not to make mistakes, right? Like you're
Yeah.
perfectly human, right?
Yeah.
Humans make mistakes, and it goes back to what I was saying before. And the more you can demonstrate and be relatable,
Mm-hmm.
to the fact that you're a human, that you're going to
Yeah.
make mistakes, you're going to give yourself grace, and that also is demonstrating that you're going to give them grace when they make a mistake, and
Mm-hmm.
own it and learn from it and commit not to do it again, just like we were talking about.
Yeah.
It starts to you know unshackle, I guess, like
Mm-hmm.
the hindrances of that trying to be perfect and be
Yeah.
invulnerable, so.
Yeah. How much of that, whether it's like characteristics or personality traits, do you attribute to or believe to be true? Or maybe you can just speak even through your own experience back when you were the MSP leader, where as tacticians and technicians and like problem solvers, like innate troubleshooting style personalities, I sort of saw this, one, in my own existence, and then two, when I was responsible for techs, where like the admission of I don't know just attached to like this fear of failure. Like there was so much emotionally, and I don't, maybe it wasn't emotional, but like you could feel that. At least I could. I'll speak for myself when I was in those roles where like I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to not be able to help. I didn't want to not know how to fix it. Like it was this open loop in my brain, right? And yet most of the sharpest coachable moments and learning moments for me was in that space where I took it too far, meaning like I held on too long, right? Out
Mhm.
of this like unknown hubris of like I felt like it was a fear of failure if I asked for help or I went somewhere else with it. And one, did you experience something similar in your growth professionally? And then two, did you ever come up with a way of like helping lead others through that light bulb moment too?
uh as far as the situation that you describe, right, with the tacticians out there like working on the tickets,
Mm-hmm.
it was one of my like out of the gate orientation, like you have to ingrain this in your mindset, which is this: I have a lot of grace, I have a lot of patience. And what I don't have patience for is when you sit there and you churn on something for 3 hours
Mm-hmm.
that I could have given you an answer to in 5 minutes. Like I'm going to lose my mind on that day. So I expect you that if you're working on something and you don't see light at the end of the tunnel, like
Mm-hmm.
you're really just poking and you just
Yeah.
don't know where to go. Like I'm going to be upset that
Yeah.
having now been told that I'm going to find out that
Mm.
you turned on this for 3 hours and I could have bailed you out 3 hours ago, or
Yeah.
someone could have, or whatever. I'm going to be upset about that. We're a team. I don't expect you to know everything. I expect
Mhm.
you to be resourceful. And a part of being resourceful is seeking the answers from someone else on the team.
Mhm.
And or if they don't have it, maybe you've got second sets of eyes on it, whatever. But do
Yeah.
not do not sit there and I hate losing time. It just is me.
Yeah.
Like people that have worked for me, maybe listen to this or met me, like I hate, that's the one asset we're never getting back. I hate to lose time. And to
Mhm.
me, like something like that, where that technician churned on something for hours and just
Yeah.
didn't have the whatever it is, whether
Yeah.
it was fear or too egotistical or whatever, to raise their hand and go, man, I need help with this.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be happy about it, because it's
Yeah.
just it is literally a waste. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. What I hear you saying, or what I should say, I hear my father's words echoing in my ears as you just said that last part. And the phrase, which was one of the most powerful and one of the most benevolent phrases I ever had him give me, was that he taught me I needed to give myself permission to, right? And then insert whatever that is. But like it was
Yeah.
sort of an unlock for my brain where like I had to give myself permission to ask for help or to
Yeah.
seek out the answer or go there. And I feel like I felt the same way you did, where it's like, you did what? Like, help me understand how you got to this end result. Like, I'm pissed about the 3 hours we can't get back because, yeah, like any of the other 18 people in the room could have helped solve, faster in the shortcut. And because we're talking about my father's words, one of the other ones, and I saw your recent post on this, which is why I want to circle it back and bring it up too, is he used to tell me, because I grew up pretty opinionated. I was in debate class, that kind of stuff. So like for a long time, I saw communication as a win-lose dynamic, right? And I don't like to lose. I
Hmm.
still don't, but I've learned. And he used to always tell me, like, by the time I figured out how to listen to understand and not to respond is when sort of like my future would open up to me. And there's different ways of saying that same thing, but I had seen one of your posts, which always resonates with me when I see it written that way, is seeking first to understand and before being understood, or the other variations of it. And I want you to maybe break that concept down in your own words, because I feel like once people, once once that clicks for people, it really truly is where like opportunity opens. So for anyone who hasn't heard or seen or felt that kind of a reality shift yet, how can we unpack that concept and open the door
I
for
think
them?
to me, it starts with something again next to losing time. I think the next thing I really dislike is assumptions,
Mm,
right? Don't assume. And I always like, is more of it as it is. I used to say, like, look, in the Marine Corps, you can't just assume no one's behind that corner, behind that door. Like, you got to assume there's a bad guy there, because it's assumptions get people killed. It's kind of like what I
yeah.
said. Like, don't make assumptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't assume that data is backed up. Check that data is
Mm-hmm.
backed up, right? Don't assume that the customer knows where things stand. Make sure they know where things
Yeah.
stand, right? And I think that starts to lead into, when you're working with your team or whatever, start asking questions, and I always kind of word this like, that'll start giving you the answers to the test to go ahead
Mm-hmm.
and provide how you want to be understood.
Mm,
Right. So, obviously the credit belongs to who's articulated that best, is Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But seek first to understand, then to be understood. And this works across the board. Like, as you go to that technician that's been struggling with something for 3 hours, well, the bad leader, toxic leader, even
mm,
methodology would be go storm in there and start chewing their butt for being had worked on that for the next 3 hours. Or you can go in
yeah.
and go, hey, Johnny, Sally, whatever,
Yeah.
tell me what's going on. Like what's and then they're going to tell you, like, well, I started this and I started that and I did this and that. And so, have you asked anyone for help? No, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't.
Yeah.
If you think you should have, right? Like, you're
Mm-hmm.
interviewing them, you're seeking to understand how they saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like, you don't want this issue to come we're picking on this one issue, but
Yeah.
you want to understand where they're seeing it. In Lions Guide and our instructors, and I give Flip all the credit for even giving me this analogy. It's like if you take a beach ball, right, and you set a beach ball in the middle of a table, and if you imagine a beach ball, it's got different colored panels, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting on this side of the table and you're on that, I'm going to say, hey, the beach ball is white, blue, and red.
Mm.
And you're going to be sitting on the other side of the table going, no, it's purple, green, and orange. Only way I'm going to see it the way you see it is if we spin that beach ball around, right? And I start to understand what you're seeing. And so as a good leader and a good, we talked earlier about how hard it is to get clients.
Yeah.
So you don't want to lose them. How
Mm-hmm.
hard is it to get good help? Right.
Yeah.
And I kick myself to this day. I've lost some good technicians,
Mm.
because certainly I didn't wake out of bed, and I'm still learning as a leader. So I don't even mean to say this braggadociously, but I didn't wake up one day and be a great leader.
Mm-hmm.
I made a lot of mistakes, and I'll tell you, like, people, quit bad leadership,
Yeah.
and I've made some bonehead, didn't seek first to understand,
Mm-hmm.
threw my Sergeant Marine hat on and like tore
Yeah.
through employees that quit on me
Mm-hmm.
because I was wrong. So back to it's hard to win clients. It's hard to get good people on your team. So do you really want to be going in there, being unreasonable, egotistical, have your superiority complex show its ugly face,
Mm-hmm.
and then go, you know what? I don't need this, because they can go start looking for another job and probably get a pay raise next week,
Yeah.
because everyone's starving for good help, right?
Right.
So that's the impacts of not seeking to understand and taking those opportunities to go, hey, tell me what you saw here so that I can help you see it differently, right? Because I'm gonna spin the speech ball back and go, hey, here's what's
Yeah.
happened as a result of you not asking for help, and so on and so forth.
Right. Earlier, you had mentioned that the when you're in a service business, right, it's really about trust. So trust is the currency. That made me think about the currency of leadership, and maybe you can also offer some contrast between like leadership in the Marine Corps, where it's rank and file, and whether it's earned or unearned, right? Like it just is what it is. There's a pecking order there, as compared to the business ecosystem, especially in small business, where again it's maybe less than 20 employees. It may not be any different, but I imagine the currency is still trust, right? And so, but trust with your people, trust with your customers. But are there any, if you had to break that down into like a 3-part framework of either how to build, cultivate, or retain trust with your team, right? Because we're just learning and leaning into being a leader specific to trust. Is there any wisdom you have there?
Yeah, I mean, that'll come back to clarity and vision too, right?
Mm,
So, and I guess this is probably another trigger point for me, right? Like I've told friends and people, like, if I can't believe the words coming out of your mouth, I'd rather not waste my time even talking to you, right?
mm,
Like, and that's it. It's the root of trust. Like, if I can't
yeah.
trust you, I really don't want to exhaust time, energy, or resources on you, right?
Yeah.
So I think, like, yes, trust. You're asking for your team to trust you. You're asking for your clients to
Yeah.
trust you. But there is trust capital, and I think again, back to David, I think he was the first person I ever heard here really articulate it in that way. Like, it's trust capital, and
Mm,
you're always depositing, and and then you're going to have a moment that you're going to screw up, but you only hope there's enough trust capital in the bank that it
yeah.
doesn't default the account, right? And that's the
Mm-hmm.
same with your people. That's the same with your customers. And that's really, trust is earned. I think there's people that are going to start with some default faith that they're
Sure.
making the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you have to, prove that out, right? You got to convert that faith into trust,
Mm,
because and you're right,
yeah.
because there's the whole chicken and the egg. Like, do you give
Yeah.
trust, you
I
earn
love that
trust, or
way. I
whatever?
love the way you said that. You got to convert the faith to trust, right?
Yeah. So
And you
so
can't even get the faith if you haven't cast the appropriate vision or shown up in such a way where you've given them something to believe in.
Right. Exactly
Right.
right. And that's back to clarity, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
is, hey, this is what it's going to look like when you work here. This is what it's going
Yeah.
to look like when you hire us to
Mm,
be your support, right? So you're casting a vision that they say, yes, this is solving my problems,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's something else that I talk to people and it's like, man, we get in such a habit of having what I call I problems. And
Mhm.
what's an I problem? It's I this, I that, whatever.
Yeah.
And I say turn that into communication with the YOU spelt out, right?
Mm.
You're sitting in front of that prospect to talk about them, not about
Mm.
you, right? You're there
Yeah.
because they have a
Love that.
problem that they're trying to find someone to solve for.
Mhm.
Especially today, like all the
Yeah.
MSPs are seemingly the same. They don't really know, right? So,
Mhm.
so the one that can come in and demonstrate that they're a leader, that this
Mhm.
customer can count on them to lead to solve their problems, is for the better. The same thing with hiring your staff. Those are life change moments, right? Like
Mhm.
when you're hiring or firing someone, that's a black and white on their life. Like
Mhm.
you are making a mark on their life when that person you hire comes into your firm. Like
Yeah.
that's a life changing event. When you fire
Mhm.
them, that's a life changing event. And so when you're hiring someone, even they need to know what it's going to look like here. You need to know. You need to make sure
Yeah.
that you've got a plan for it, because you don't want to bring someone in who leaves a job to come
Mhm.
work for you. And now you do the poor leader thing. You just grab anybody and throw it in a seat,
Yeah.
and it didn't work out. Now you're firing them. Like that was a life changing event that could have been your fault, right?
Mhm.
So it's not for the faint of heart, and that goes back to leadership is hard.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding. Being a business owner is requires you to be a good leader, and there are rewards as a result of it. And you can't just like think. And trust me, again, I've made this mistake. I had someone tell me once, especially when I was hot and heavy building Corsica originally, like, dude, yeah. Someone had to say one day, hey, we all didn't go to Marine Corps boot camp, right? Like,
Mm.
because I'm just going
Sure.
hard, and that was a good gut check moment. Like, yeah, right. Like, why
Mm.
am I talking to my staff like they went through 13 weeks of Marine Corps boot camp like I did, right? And they've
Yeah.
been conditioned to kind of be run so hard the way I was. And
Mhm.
no, like you're right. Thank you. Like, boom, like beach ball moment. Like, hey,
Yeah.
we're not all Marines.
Mhm.
And so, it trust is key, but that's going to come down to you doing the right things, having the right vision, and aligning with it, and getting other
Yeah.
people too as well.
Yeah. One of the ways that we talk often about your beach ball example is, I don't know where to attribute it to, but it's just how we refer to things is really causing yourself to come alongside the other person shoulder to shoulder instead of spear to spear, right? Like, how do I get shoulder to shoulder with you, Dale, rather than spear to spear? It's sort of that win lose mentality, and like,
Yeah,
and and I loved how you put communication, but spelling it out. Like, that's brilliant. And if I think and visualize through that and realize I'm coming to meet with you, YOU, right? Like, now I can actually lean into that so much more and be like, you're the reason that I'm here. So let's have the focus be there. I think that's a great, powerful visual way of just setting the mental tone for how you need to show up to a conversation with a mutually beneficial outcome
yeah.
rather than like win lose.
I mean, look, the win lose mindset is a loser's mindset.
Mm.
If in order for me to win, you have to lose. Like
Yeah.
that's such a loser way to be. And I'll say that because certainly I've met with people like that. I've
Yeah.
partnered with people like that. I've had customers that are like that, right? Like they always
Mm-hmm.
have to feel like they won and you lost. Like the same thing. Like people, I just don't have time for that. Like
Yeah.
if you're a win lose mindset person, whatever the engagement type is, man, like I'm not your guy,
Yeah.
because you get like we'll spin it around, right? You get those customers that it beat you like a redheaded stepchild.
Yeah.
Sorry for the pun, internet world,
Uh-huh.
but like,
Yeah.
but you got to fire those accounts because
Mm-hmm.
like it's not a winner for you if you're losing profit. Like, what are you in business for if this customer's kind of pushed you down where you're not making any money? They're beating you to death.
Yeah.
They're costing you
Abusing your
twice as much
people.
of what they pay. Yeah, they're abusing your people. Like that's a
Yeah.
win-lose relationship. You don't want
Yeah.
to be in that. And frankly, I think hopefully the MSP owners out there would appreciate this. Like we were very early going full on fixed fee, which is kind of mainstream today, but
Mm-hmm.
and thus why we had a lot of success early on with new customer acquisitions, because it was very unique at the time. But
Yeah.
I would explain to customers that our fixed fee model is I don't want to be billing you for time. I want you
Mm.
paying me a fixed monthly fee to not have problems because we're doing our job well. That's how we make profits. The more I have to
Mm-hmm.
come out here and work on your stuff, the less profitable I am. And that's the win-win of this relationship with us as your provider and you as our client is that you're paying me so that you can focus on your business. It's running. You're not having problems. You're not down all the time. It's not holding you up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we're doing the right things. We're not in firefighting mode. We're actually in proactive mode. I'm making money. You're making money. It's a win-win. And that was my
Yeah.
sales pitch. You guys take it and run with it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's that's the win-win world that we thrive in.
Mm-hmm.
I win, you lose. You win, I lose. Like it's
Yeah.
just
And to tie a couple things together with what you just said, one, take what he just said. Two, steal the communication, spelling out the you part, right? Because they're the person that you need to be focusing on. And then three, because he didn't explicitly say it, but I observed it, was focus on the outcome that you're delivering for them,
yeah.
right? Because one of my mentors helped me come to understand, especially on the sales and marketing side, that Simon Sinek has that the why piece, right? Or like know your why or whatnot. And
Start with why.
why I agree with that is true. This mentor kind of laced something over the top that said, your prospect doesn't care about what you do until they understand why they are the reason that you do it. Right. So like not just the why you do it, but why they are the reason that you did it. It was just like when we switched our messaging to that and our communication to that, it was just like this catalyst to growth.
Well, it's funny. Like I'll see organizations like, we connected on LinkedIn, right? And I see
Mm-hmm.
organizations go, we had a sales meeting today. Like that's their company post. I'm like,
Yeah.
why does your prospect or client care that
Mm-hmm.
you had a sales day, right? Like you
Yeah.
went off site and you told all your salespeople how to come win. Like what's in it for them? Why do they care, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and again, even there, like the communication that you give to the externals, right? Through your marketing, your social media, like what's in it for them?
Yeah.
Like just sitting there, look at me, look at
Mm-hmm.
me, look at me, look what we're doing, but it's not really relatable or impactful to things they care about.
Mm-hmm.
It's falling on deaf ears. It's not really
Yeah.
doing you any good.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to forget this because it's the one of the most important parts of the show. But if you had to leave one question behind for the next guest, what would that one question be?
I would say, for the next guest, and I guess this is in the spirit of leadership and vision, like where truly are you going to be 10 years from now? What does your life look like? And whatever you're doing right now, what is it leading you to? And I ask that question because I think a lot of us are so heads down in the here and now.
Hmm.
And back maybe to your why, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of, why am I doing this and all that? And it's really because you've never really picked your head up to go, what am I doing this for? And to the MSP owners out there, like, ask that of yourself. Like, what am I doing this for? Like, where am I,
Hmm.
and I know like every business management exercise has you do that, right? Like the 10-year
Yeah.
plan, but we don't do it like in a meaningful way, in
Mm-hmm.
my opinion. And I think that's where a lot of folks are really burning themselves out or not to, committed or
Yeah.
making some of the right things because they really haven't clearly
Mm.
identified like where are they going to be from now. Just
Yeah.
just write your age down, write 2025, write your age, and then write 2035 and write your age. And just doing that little exercise by
Yeah.
itself is going to shock you into going, oh crap, like I'm
Yeah.
on the clock. Like, what is my life going to look like in 2035?
Right.
And that'll start to align things for you. And that's where that clarity brings confidence. Confidence brings courageous action.
Yeah. I love that. It reminds me of, I kind of have recently I've been diving back into some Napoleon Hill reading. And, one of the things that was a recent piece that I pulled out of the book was the power of imagination. And the importance of doing what you just described is taking it from something that you truly see and believe and materializing it first by putting it on a piece of paper, and how
Yeah.
critical that is ultimately in finding your definition of success. So I love that exercise, as painful as it may be, but I like that you
Yeah.
gave it black and white clarity. Like if you don't know where to start, you have to put your current age plus 10 years and how old you're going to be then. And I think everyone should take out that piece of paper and start that process, even if they stare at it for days before they come back and revisit it, because it'll create an open loop and
Yep.
force them into it.
Yep. You want to take it to the next level, list out the 5 closest people to you and do the exact same thing.
Hmm.
When you see that your child that's 8 today, 10 years from now is going to be 18, and what does life need to look like for you and them, it just starts to again, to your point, it starts to force you to imagine
Mm-hmm.
where you want to be, and things start
Yeah.
to take shape of where you're going.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dale, I appreciate you being here, coming on the MSP Insider Show. If people like what you have to say, more interested in your story, or want to reach out for additional help, guidance, or services, where's the best place for them to find you?
Find me on LinkedIn, Dale Walls. Aside from being an MSP owner, again, one of my businesses is Lions Guide, which we have a lot of leadership, business owner, organizational leader, really training material. I'm
Mhm.
very, this is a passion project for me. I love helping business owners kind of gain these types of insights. And being a business owner or leader, it can feel very lonely. You can feel very isolated. We talked about vulnerability. Sometimes
Mhm.
you're not willing to be vulnerable because you're not right. You don't feel
Yeah.
like they're peers that you can go, man, this sucks, right? You don't want to go to your
Right.
team and go, man, I'm really struggling. Like you don't feel like you don't. So that hey, a lot of people feel that way. That's why we built Lions Guide, is to kind of be a community of folks that are in these leadership roles, but they don't have to be isolated. And then we've got all kinds of training and lesson learned for myself and other contributors that have been there, done that, to hopefully give you some insights that, again, you can build your own formula, whatever that may be in your world of leadership, whether it's you, your family, your business, your organization, your team. And so look up Lions Guide. We got an app, and or otherwise just ping me on LinkedIn or whatever. Happy to help however I can.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you again, Dale, for being here. Appreciate it. And we will see y'all next time on the next episode of MSP Insider.